Alright everyone, before we get into the thick of the video, just to say if I look a little disheveled, I just had to shovel snow again after shoveling it no less than 3 fucking times yesterday. Yeah, and it looks like it's like Noah's Ark, only Vermont style, which means it's gonna snow for 40 days and 40 nights. It's literally gonna snow all day. I'm gonna have to shovel several more times. I hate it. I really probably should not be living in northern New England, especially tax-wise. But yeah, we gotta talk about Puerto Rico, because the governor there has okayed a further vote on statehood. You'll remember a couple of years ago they held a preliminary vote and there were 3 options. Puerto Rico becomes a state, Puerto Rico becomes an independent nation, or Puerto Rico continues on as a colonial asset, a territory. The vast majority of people that voted either for statehood or independence, no single category carrying more than 50%. And the idea is that they want to hold a binding final vote to refer to the U.S. House, hey, we're officially petitioning to either become a state or we are throwing off territorial status. Puerto Rico is now declaring independence. By the way, they can do either. Here's the thing, there's actually a fairly good chance the Republicans would be on board with admitting them if they were to actually hold that final referendum. The one problem has been throughout time that this state that has a land area and a population roughly the same as Connecticut and could get a hell of a lot more development if it were a state as opposed to a territory where it's up in the air and could declare independence. Technically, a lot of businesses don't want to touch it. They get a huge amount of shoreline. You've got a rather large Caribbean tropical destination. It could be one of the gems of the U.S. economically. Instead, it's largely underdeveloped because of corrupt governance, because it's a territory and it's not subject to the same regulation as the states, can be a problem, and then the investment. What's held it back is that people who don't want to solve the question at all, namely some of the far left movements there, and I think some of the nativistic elements that want independence, they don't actually show up to vote, and so turnout is very low. And then they can say, look, not enough people voted, so it's obvious nobody cares, even though that's not actually the case. They're just telling people to stay home so that no result can get in. The thing is, though, they're trying to have a binding final referendum this time, and the House GOP is actually on board. The Republicans have already signaled, yeah, you should hold your vote and be fine. They want to limit it to 2 options with a binding result. We're either in or out. We're a state, the colonial question has passed. We can't be a territory anymore. We want either to be a state or independent. Come what will, we'll respect the result. If I had to guess, I'd say, if you have such a vote, and it does appear that it's getting more likely over time, that the number of people who support one or the other option is increasing. The number of people who want to keep the status quo has been falling away, partially due to poor disaster response causing even more economic stress in an area that's already billions in debt. Now, I have to hazard a guess there'd be a pretty good chance they'd petition for statehood. Now, would the Congress actually accept that petition? Possibly. The Democrats would be on board because they're like, hey, it'll be a blue state. I choose to believe that it wouldn't be for very long for various economic reasons. They would want it in as a blue state. The Republicans might say, well, this will give a morale boost to the U.S. Trump probably would be on board. He'd be like, hey, I get to be president when a new state's admitted for the first time since, what, 1949 or something? When was Alaska admitted and Hawaii? Those were the last 2. I can't remember the years that they were admitted as full-on states. Well, Hawaii wasn't really admitted. It was more annexed and forced into status. Over time, it would be a morale boost for the country. It would actually be an economic boon. Some people have been like, hey, you listen to like the identitarians or something. They'll say, well, you're a cuck because you want these people that are largely Hispanic in the country. I'm like, they're already U.S. territory. They're already citizens of the United States. They're just not living in an actual state. And you can't force them to gain independence. They have to hold a vote, so you should support them having at least a referendum. You should just support them to gain independent status. However, that would be very problematic for a lot of U.S. firms and people who are located there. There's already free movement, so it's not like it's changing the demographics of the U.S. That's a boogeyman that's dredged up by some of the identitarian elements. And then people on the left would be like, oh, we should definitely grab them in. They'll be like hyper-liberal. I don't think so. Once they become an actual regular state, a fully functioning state, so the federal government can come in and sweep through all the corruption there, all the Democrats are probably going to be out of office. You probably end up with a lot of Republicans actually in office, at least temporarily. When people realize that restructuring allows them to live a better life, might be a little bit less given over to far leftism. So I wouldn't worry. And like I said, the state would be the size of Connecticut, so it's viable. Huge amount of shoreline, high population, and also a lot of natural wonders there. By the way, a lot of archaeological digs. If you've ever read about archaeology of the Caribbean, very good course. I took a UVM, Professor Kroc. Got an A in the class, if I recall. It was a really good course, very interesting. Some, I believe, Taino remains, among other things there. But yeah, it's funny because he is relating the tale. I know this is a little bit off topic, that anytime you do an archaeological, anytime you want to put up like a gas station or a house anywhere in the Caribbean, you have to have like a bunch of people come in and do test pits just to make sure there's no important native remains there, because they're not even really sure exactly where they'll be all the time. In some cases, you could have a village and there's nothing left but some shell middens, basically a trash pit, and some charcoal from fire pits and some post holes, like discolorations in the sand that go up and down where wood once was, and it's dissolved into it over time. It's actually kind of interesting. Until the late pre-colonial era, you don't have a whole lot of substantial remains. Potsherds, basically. Even most of those have been degraded into sand by now, unless they were put in a cave for religious purposes. It's like the same... I'm getting off topic, never mind. But as far as statehood, I've been generally supportive of it. I think, though, any admission to statehood needs to come with debt restructuring. It definitely needs not to add its debt to the collective pile of the rest of the states and simply get bailed out. No, there need to be strings attached. Like, hey, give up this fucking socialistic bullshit that got you into this debt in the first place. Then, yeah, okay. It'd give people a morale boost. It would increase the U.S. prestige. And likewise, if it declares independence, we don't have to worry about the debt anymore. So it's a win-win situation either way. In or out, there should be a vote. In fact, Congress should force them to hold a vote. Say, look, all of those of you who want like independence or to continue colonial status, you better turn out to vote, because if people turn out to vote for statehood and you stay home, you're going to be a state and it's not going to be your choice. It'd be really funny to see that. But it is funny to see how there are far-left elements. They want the colonial question to keep going because they're so fucking corrupt. They're like leeches off of the Puerto Rican people. You saw with, what's her name there, the mayor of San Juan, where she's getting, investigated for various corruption and embezzlement and all of these other things. They had this big-ass, basically, wasn't it an airfield full of bottles of water they hadn't even distributed? They tried to blame it on Trump. What really happened is that the mayor of San Juan and some other politicians blocked aid being properly dispersed so they could do that, and then they could sell more of their, what was it, nasty bitch shirts or whatever she developed there. Some stupid shit like that. Nasty girl or, that various lines. So she's probably made a lot of money off that. She should have to give it all to the Puerto Rican people because she's basically defrauding them. That's about all. Peace out.